How about them Thunder? They erased a double-digit deficit and basically said, okay, see you later to the Rockets. Now that might have been a dad joke. Let me cut those dad jokes out before I say too many of them and accidentally become a dad. But let's talk about the OKC Thunder. Because despite starting this series off 0-2, they've managed to win the last 2 games and now the series is all tied up. Now, I'm not sure what there is to do in Oklahoma City. I've never been there, but I'm sure the people in Oklahoma must be living it up however they do it in Oklahoma. Before the playoffs even started, my original prediction for this series was Rockets in 6. And after the first 2 games, I was starting to feel like I might have overestimated the Thunder. But after these last 2 games and what I've seen from the Thunder, it's starting to look like that underdog mentality that I saw in them from the beginning might be what the Thunder is actually made of. So let's talk about the Oklahoma City Thunder and why the Rockets and the rest of the NBA have to watch out for them. So let's start off with the worst case scenario. Obviously, everyone knows what the best case scenario is. The best case scenario for every single team in the playoffs is that they somehow win the championship. But for the Oklahoma City Thunder, the worst case scenario is that they don't win any more games. They won games 3 and 4 against the Rockets. Worst case scenario, they don't win any more games. And I'm not saying that's gonna happen, I'm just saying that's worst case scenario. But even if that does happen, ladies and gentlemen, do you guys know how impressive that is? Before the season even started, the Oklahoma City Thunder only had a 0.2% chance of making the playoffs. 0.2%? There's probably a higher chance Beyonce DMs me tonight than just 0.2%. Yet somehow, the Oklahoma City Thunder, led by a 35-year-old Chris Paul, who has had multiple injuries in his career and who's been injured in the playoffs before, somehow managed to figure it out and not only just make it to the playoffs, but at the very least, they've already won 2 games. Now, I'm not one to celebrate a moral victory. However, if the worst case scenario does come true and the Thunder don't win any more games, having made it to the playoffs, having won 2 games, when you only had a 0.2% chance of making it to the playoffs to begin with, that's already enough to be proud of if you're a Thunder fan. Now, I am not a Thunder fan, but if I were, I would already be proud of my team. So why have the Oklahoma City Thunder suddenly been beating the Rockets? Now, essentially, there are a few factors that I am going to point out, but the first one and the most impressive one is the fact that Chris Paul and the Oklahoma City Thunder know how to close out a game. If Chris Paul isn't scoring, he's either assisting or somehow telling people what to do before the play actually even happens. Now, how is he doing that, you might be wondering? That really all comes down to being a veteran point guard with a really high basketball IQ. After watching this game last night, at the end of the game, I thought Chris Paul had somewhere near 40 points. And to my surprise, he only had 26. I mean, I don't want to say only 26 and make it sound like 26 isn't impressive. Like, I'm sure right now Paul George would do anything in his power to score 26 points tonight. But the way Chris Paul is scoring these points and the way Chris Paul is leading the offense really makes it seem like he's scoring 40 points. And if you watch the game, then you know exactly what I'm talking about. But pretty much all of Chris Paul's shots are a dribble combination crossover pull-up where he does a couple dribble moves, he freezes the defender, and then he pulls up for a shot, or he does a tough drive to the basket. Pretty much everything he's putting up right now is a very difficult looking shot. He makes it look easy because he's been doing this his entire life. But for anyone who has ever played basketball, you would know that shooting off the dribble and driving to the basket are nowhere near as easy as just catching and shooting. So Chris Paul, despite being in the NBA for 15 years and despite being 35 years old, he is playing like somehow he's aging backwards. And as a basketball fan and as a fan of someone who's always looked up to Chris Paul, I couldn't be any happier for him. So good for him and good for the Thunder. Now let's talk about Steven Adams. Oh my goodness, Steven Adams. Now, Steven Adams only had 12 points. And on the surface, it looks like 12 points isn't very much. And technically, you are correct. 12 points isn't really a lot. However, what Steven Adams adds for the Thunder goes a lot deeper than what the stat sheets show. He plays with an intensity in the regular season, and lately in the playoffs, I've just been seeing him up his intensity even more. He's finishing strong in the paint, he's grabbing strong rebounds, and overall, if I'm a Thunder's fan or if I were a Thunder teammate, I'd be very happy to have Steven Adams on my team. Just having someone that brings that energy day day in and day out, and someone who you know is going to have your back on the court, that intensity that he brings to the Thunder is pretty much priceless. So yeah, he only had 12 points and I believe he had 8 rebounds, but his impact on the court is a lot more than just what the stat sheets show. So I just felt the need to give Steven Adams a little bit of acknowledgement before we continue talking about the Thunder. Now, speaking of playoff intensity, that leads me to my next point. At just the young age of 22, Gilgeous-Alexander is playing like this is what he does. 22 years old, that's basically the age of a typical college senior. And last night he had 18 points, and don't get me wrong, I'm impressed by any 22-year-old who scores 18 points in the playoffs and isn't even the primary option. That is very impressive. However, what impresses me more than just his 18 points is how ferociously this dude is attacking the basket. He is attacking the basket with the utmost confidence. And some of you might be thinking that I'm overhyping him and saying, okay, whatever, his confidence, big deal, he's a confident player. But confidence goes a long way in basketball, especially in the playoffs. Look at Paul George, for example. Paul George is a very skilled player. You mean to tell me that the Monstar suddenly came to his hotel room in Orlando and stole his talent? No. Paul George just needs to get out of his head. So that's why I say Gilgeous-Alexander playing with this sort of confidence is something very incredible. So for a 22-year-old who isn't even the first option on his team to score 18 points and continuously attack the basket very intensively, props to him, man. That's impressive. Now, even though Gilgeous-Alexander played a very good game, someone who played even better than him is Dennis Schroeder. Dennis Schroeder had 30 points in 30 minutes. Now, I could speak on that, but to be honest, that is one of those stat lines that just kind of speaks for itself. That guy is looking very scary on the court. That's all I gotta say about that. Have you guys ever seen James Harden get locked up? Lou Dort is locking up James Harden. I take that back. I don't want to say locking up James Harden because James Harden had 32, 15, and 8, so I take back the words locking up. However, for the majority of this series, Lou Dort has been playing phenomenal defense on James Harden and slightly taking him out of his rhythm. To be fair to James Harden, it's not like anyone in the NBA can really stop him. The only person who can stop James Harden is James Harden. But Lou Dort is 21 years old and he's making James Harden's game a lot more uncomfortable for him. Once again, this is one of those things that the stats don't really show you. Yes, James Harden did have 30 and 15, but if you watch the game and you watch Lou Dort play defense on James Harden, he's pretty much doing the best anyone in the NBA can do when it comes to guarding James Harden. And a quick note on James Harden, even though this isn't really a video about the Rockets, ever since the bubble started, James Harden has been playing some really good defense. I'm saying there is a night and day difference between James Harden that we all know and the James Harden defense that we've seen lately. I'm not saying his defense looks like a defensive player of the year, but for someone who was known as an awful defender, his defense is looking very good right now. I'm not sure if he has a new barber in Orlando lining up his beard, giving him a little more confidence, but whatever happened to James Harden that caused him to play better defense, I'm impressed with it. So whenever I see something like that, I just gotta point it out. So now that we've talked about individual players on the Thunder, what is it that the Oklahoma City Thunder's team did as a whole that led them to erase a double-digit deficit and win this game? Now, in the first half or so of the game, I remember thinking to myself, have the Rockets even missed from 3? And then not too long later, the commentator mentioned that the Rockets have shot 8 for 8 from 3. And at the time, the Rockets were up double digits. And it just kind of makes sense. If you've made 8 for 8 from 3, 9 times out of 10, you're gonna have a pretty good lead. But then what happened after that? Well, despite shooting 8 for 8 from 3, after that, the Rockets shot 3 for 20 from 3. And they ended the game shooting 23 for 58 from 3. Now, if there's one thing I want everyone to take away from this video, it's the fact that shooting percentages are important, but they don't really tell the whole story. How often do we hear people in the barbershop or people on ESPN talking about, oh, this guy shoots this percentage and this other guy only shoots this percentage, so therefore this guy is a better shooter? And yeah, I guess there is a little bit of truth to that, but that's more of a black and white statement than anything else. For instance, Steph Curry is a 44% career three-point shooter. There's no debate that Steph Curry is a phenomenal shooter. And the Rockets shot 40% from 3 last night. So if the greatest shooter of all time shoots 44% and you as a team shoot 40% from 3, on the surface that looks like you guys had a phenomenal shooting night. However, despite shooting 40% from 3, the Rockets missed 35 three-pointers. And it was because of all those missed three-pointers that the Thunder were able to come back and essentially win the game. So yeah, on the surface, 40% from 3 does sound like a phenomenal shooting night, and let me not diminish the fact that they did shoot 40%, but when you miss 35 threes, you're playing a small ball lineup, your starting center is only 6'7", even though you're shooting 40% from 3. In reality, the only thing you're doing is giving the other team a chance to come back. 35 missed shots in a game, I don't care what percentage you're shooting. Any decent basketball team is going to be able to come back from that. So yes, when the Rockets were hot from 3, they obviously had a pretty decent lead. However, when those threes weren't falling anymore, that created the perfect opportunity for the Thunder to come back and essentially seal the deal. And that just goes back to the old saying that you live and die by the 3. I'm excited to see how this series plays out. This is definitely one of the most exciting series in the playoffs as of now. Who do you guys think is going to win this series? Let me know down in the comment section below. Please give this video a thumbs up for the YouTube algorithm. Comment your thoughts down below. I want to know what you think of everything I said. And if you're new to this channel, please hit that subscribe button. I post a new NBA video every morning, 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Thank you once again for hitting that thumbs up button, and I will see you guys tomorrow. Goodbye. If you're still here, consider watching this other video I picked out for you down below. Please just watch it. I'm trying to get to 300 subs, so go watch that video. Let me know what y'all think. And hit the like button on that video too. All right, see you guys.